Carol, do you mind, Carolyn, calling the meeting to order?
Okay, I'm Carol Hofsis, and I'm calling this meeting to order for the Open Space and Recreation Committee.
Yes. And we're going to do a roll call. Carol, can you just
I'm
say,
Carol Hofsis,
and which
and I
committee?
represent the planning board.
And Veronica, how about you go next?
Veronica Kell, and I am an at-large representative.
Okay. Just to stick with the folks who are on Zoom, Colby. You're on
Oh,
mute.
there we go. Hello. I'm here.
Can you just introduce yourself and who you represent?
Yes. My name's Colby Streeter. I represent the Conservation Commission.
Awesome. Thank you. David, I know you aren't voting, but you want to just introduce yourself just for the folks at home?
Dave Vishon,
And who you represent?
the water department,
Um,
or the board.
yes, thank you.
There you go.
Mary Jane, you want to go next?
Okay, Mary Jane Churchville, and I represent the Historic District.
Awesome. Fantastic. That was Dave Hitchin, who just introduced himself. Yep. George, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Stuart Sullivan, I represent the Board of Health.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Emmy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Emmy Hoff, and I represent Towns of Recreation.
All right. Fantastic. And I believe we have one at-large seat that is not yet filled. So there is one vacancy on the committee at this time, but we have with us 8 of the 8 seated members, and well, 7 of the 8, and Dave is still coming in hot. So we're in pretty good shape. So we definitely have a quorum. I just want to announce that the meeting is being tape recorded, and so that's happening right now.
Doors are still locked.
Doors are still
All
locked.
the doors are, yeah. I think.
Oh.
So, do you want me to go and stick a little shit in there for a minute?
Yeah,
I'm
do you
still
mind doing
waiting
that?
for a few, yeah.
And
Sure.
I can let everybody know that there's a sign-in sheet here.
Yes. we
I
have a
just wrote
sign-in
down
sheet.
I'll be right back.
the virtual attendees here. I wrote virtual next to their name. But if you're here in person, if you could please sign in.
Okay. All right. That was Emmy. She's stepping up just to make sure folks can get in. That's good to know. We've got to get that set up for the meeting tonight and then we meet in the future. Just to continue with introductions, my name is Mike Crowley. I am the land use coordinator here in the town of Townsend. I am not a member of the Open Space and Recreation Committee. Oh, James, I'm sorry, I skipped you. James Gates, would you introduce yourself, please?
James Gates, member at large, but I also represent the Townsend Ashby Soccer Association.
Fantastic. Thank you, James, for being here. All right. I got everybody right? Yes. All right. We're first meeting. We're all angering out the kinks. So this is great. Like I said, I'm Mike Crowley. I'm the land use coordinator for the town of Townsend. I am not a committee member for the Open Space and Recreation Committee. I am here to help you guys in whatever you need. You can also tell me to get out of the room at any point if you want. You're the bosses here. You're the representatives of the town, and I am the employee of the town. And with us, we have one other person. Jeff, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thanks, Michael. I'm Jeff LeGros with the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission. I'm a principal planner in their Community Development and Planning Department. And we've been tasked with helping to update Townsend's Open Space and Recreation Plan. We have received a planning assistance grant from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs to perform that task. So we're at your service. We're here today to kick it off. The Open Space and Recreation Plan is a great, robust, interesting, and what I like to think of as a fun plan that involves all kinds of aspects of the community. So this is one of the committees that you can serve on that you should really be able to enjoy yourself doing it. There's a lot of fun things that come into it, from recreation to conservation, trails, and everything in between, really. So I'm really looking forward to getting all of your input. The big thing with the Open Space Committee is your local knowledge should help to inform the process so that I'm able to pull everything together and update the relevant sections of the report. The 2 handouts that I passed out today are basically One of them describes the process involved with updating a plan. On the back, there's a small table or chart that describes which relevant sections will most likely need to be updated, a couple that may not need anything at all, and some of them that are kind of in the middle. They might need some information, they might not. So with everybody's different backgrounds, and whether you're representing recreation or conservation or the water department, all of it is important, and your input will help to fill in the gaps in those chapters. The second handout is a Sustainable Development Principles, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It was one of the underlying themes of the Planning Assistance Grant.
All right.
I do have one. It was one of the underlying themes of the Planning Assistance Grants for this particular funding cycle.
So we'll talk a little bit more about this in the work session, but thanks for the introduction. I really appreciate it, and some background information. The folks online,
Thank you.
did you
get a chance to sign the sheet?
I'm not sure I sent everything that Jeff sent over to you guys. Did you guys receive that, or did I forget to forward it? I think I forgot to forward it. So you're all get to look at my email really quick while I'm going to forward it to y'all. So forward.
And don't worry too much about the handouts. They're informative, really. We're going to talk about it, like Michael said, and he'll send it along now, but don't spend too much time trying to catch up and read it all right now. It's not critically important, just more something to have and to help you as you look over it at home or after the meeting, just to better understand the process and some of the things we'll talk about today.
So just so you know, when Veronica and I first met, I actually took the document and tried to update it myself.
Yep,
So I made a lot of comments along the way in the document,
great.
when I went through it in some, whatever, typos and stuff. But I made comments and highlighted areas and stuff. But the other thing is, I know we're also working on the master plan. And a lot of the material in here could come from the master plan if it ever gets signed.
Yeah.
So that it's all the same.
Yep.
So we're not having
Okay.
two different plans that have
Yep.
similar sections and have different information.
Mhm.
That's good.
So that's real. Thank you first off for doing all that work. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think we have to move on to, just to go through the agenda. We don't have a chair additions and deletions. We don't have a chair yet. And we don't have any approval of minutes. We did technically meet once before, but we don't have the same membership as we did. So I don't think we can approve the minutes. But that brings us to 2.1, the work session, which is the election of positions. So just procedurally, all committees have to have a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk. The chair is the person who calls the meeting to order and goes through the process. All of this is, when you went to the town clerk, you received some information on ethics training, open meeting law trainings, and things like that. You have some time to go through all that, but I really would encourage you to take some time and go through that, whatever it takes to get that taken care of, and then before our next meeting, which whenever we pick the date, usually I think you have 30 days from when you take office to go through that. But that's all kind of outlined, but all committees need to have those. And so it's procedurally the chair is the person who calls the meeting to order and keeps on the agenda and things like that. And so we're kind of, that's why we don't have a chair at the moment, which is why I asked Carol as a pre-existing member to call us to order. But we do need to have elections for the chair, vice chair, and the clerk. They're basically the people who, keep the meeting moving along. There isn't necessarily any specific workload that's assigned to them beyond just being in those roles. And we'll talk a lot about what the open space committee is and what the open space plan is going to be and what everyone's roles in it going forward is, so that people understand that they don't have to all go through and redo Carol's work that she already did. And, we've got Jeff and myself to go through, but we do need these folks to kind of go forward. So I guess we would technically start by asking this, anyone willing to be nominated to be the chair, or anyone would like to nominate someone else to be the chair.
I will make a nomination. Or is someone doing that in the room?
No one is doing that in the room, Veronica. You can go right ahead.
Okay, I would nominate, and I haven't asked her, Carol Hofsey's as the chair if she is willing to accept.
You're gonna do that, Veronica.
I'm sorry, Carol.
I guess I can, but
Okay.
if anybody wants to be chair, I'll be happy to. You know.
We can all fight it out. I know you're all
I'll
eager
be
to
your
jump on.
vice, Carol.
You'd be the
Well,
I'll be
vice.
your vice.
Okay.
So we have a motion on the floor for nomination of Carol as the chair. Carol Hofstas is the chair. Do we have someone
I
who's
second.
seconded? There we are. Emmy has second. So hold on, I'm writing notes on this one, so. Carol, Emmy second. All right. And so I guess we have to take a vote. So normally what I'm doing right now is normally what the chair does. And you guys have sure seen it in some of the committees that we've worked on before. As we work forward in this group, if anyone has any procedural questions, you can always ask. This is not, you're not expected to know all this stuff. We're figuring it all out together, and it's great. We have some good people who know what they're doing. So I believe we have the chair, so we need to have a vote. We'll do a roll call vote just for the sake of it, just because we're still kind of up in the air. So the motion to have Carol, the nomination for Carol Hofstas to be the chair of the planning committee, it has been seconded. So we'll just do a roll call vote on this. Mary Jane Churchville?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Emmy Hoff?
Yes.
Carol Hofstas?
Can I say yes to
I
myself?
think
don't
you
know.
do.
Do I?
right?
Okay.
Okay. George Sullivan?
Yes.
Colby Streeter?
Yes.
Right. Veronica Kell?
Yes.
James Gates?
Yes.
All right. And Dave, I don't think you get to vote on this one because you haven't gotten sworn in, but we're love having you here.
Not this one.
All right. So I think that passes unanimously. So congratulations, Carol. Does anyone want to nominate a vice chair? This is a great time to throw it back at people.
I nominate Emmy Hall.
Ooh, ooh. All right.
No, I'm good.
I have James Gates nominating Emmy Hoff. Emmy, is that? Are you
Yeah,
cool?
that's fine.
All right. All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Carol, a second. And we'll do a roll call vote again, just for procedural. Mary Jane Churchville,
Yes.
Emmy Hoff,
Yes.
Carol Hofstas,
Yes.
George Sullivan,
Yes.
Colby Streeter,
Yes.
Veronica Kell,
Yes.
and James Gates.
Yes.
All right, I think that's another unanimous. Ooh, you guys are cruising. You're gonna two things done, unanimous. I love this committee. Good for you.
So far.
And for those of you, we can talk about different roles in committees and what that actually means once we get out of the meeting. I'm certainly happy to be available for any of that. I'm sure we all are. We do have one more role, which is the clerk. Do we have any nominations to be the clerk?
I will nominate Mary Jane Churchville, who I don't know Mary Jane, but hello.
Hi, Veronica. Thank you. That's quite the introduction. What does the clerk have to do? That's right.
That can get determined a certain amount. So in some committees, the clerk is the note taker. But if you have someone who is a staff person who's willing and able to take notes, which would happen me, depending on how we go forward, unless you throw me out of the room, you don't necessarily have to take notes. The administrative roles of the clerk are laid out in kind of the boards and the committee's handbook, but they're very much contingent on the needs of the committee. I do know that the clerk doesn't ever get while if the chair is absent, the vice chair acts as in place, but the clerk never gets elevated to that point.
Okay.
So it is in some ways just an administrative position where you get to have your name on paperwork. In other ways, there are some responsibilities we can go over if we want. And if that's, let me see if I actually have it right here, because that's a good question to have. So,
Yeah.
so in the boards and committees handbook, it's defined as the secretary, but it's the clerk in this. It's responsible for taking and transcribing the committee's minutes, scheduling the place, date, and time of meeting, and posting meetings within the town clerk no later than 48 hours before a meeting, including Sundays and holidays. The clerk should also check the committee board mail at the town hall mailboxes. All of those duties can also be delegated to any administrative staff you happen to have.
Okay.
But we
Then
still
I'm-
have to
then
have
I'm
it.
in.
All right, okay. Hey, it's
Thank
more
you, Mary
authority to
Jane.
delegate. All right, so Mary Jane has accepted Veronica's.
Offering up. Okay.
All right, and do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Carol, a second. So this right here is what I will be doing, that the clerk could do if she wanted to. It's totally his or her purview.
I'm gonna watch you. I'll learn.
All right, all right. Second, so we'll do one more roll call vote. Mary Jane Churchville,
Oh, yes.
Amy Hoff,
Yes.
Carol Hosses,
Yes.
George Sullivan,
Yes.
Colby Streeter,
Yes.
Veronica Kell,
Yes.
and James Gates.
Yes.
Fantastic, then that is unanimous. All right, awesome. Good job, everybody. We have a committee. Yay. That's wonderful. That's great. You guys can move up to the front if you want to take the comfy seats. You're in the leadership position.
Just fine right
So-
here.
I'm happy to help in whatever ways in moving through the agenda and things like that for today and ask in the future. So kind of what I've been doing is calling for saying, I have a second, do I have a second? That's kind of the rare roles that fall in the purview of the chair to normally do. I'm happy to help doing that. Since it's our first committee meeting, we're all getting settled in here, and I'm super appreciative of everyone. But I believe that was the one thing that was really important that we managed to already cover, so that's great. I'll go home, just kidding. Okay, so that was great. Thanks, everybody. Next thing on the agenda is a presentation by Jeffrey. So you want to go ahead and jump on that, Jeff? And then I can put that up if you'd like.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the one that says presentation. And I think I need to screen share. Can everyone see that? All right, I see Colby nodding. Awesome. I'm going to minimize. All right. Jeff? Yes. Just don't touch any wires.
Nope, I won't.
You'll have to just
use the mouse.
click on the side panel, because if you go into presentation mode, it screws with the owl sometimes.
It does? Okay.
Yeah.
So just leave it like
Just leave it
this,
like this and click on the slide.
and it's big enough for everyone to see.
Can everyone see that?
Okay,
Thanks,
perfect. All right, so welcome. Again, I'm Jeff LeGros with MRPC, and today we're going to be talking about updating an open space and recreation plan. The way I've set up my presentation here is basically I'm going to be going through each section of the report and giving a quick rundown of what it is and what it basically encompasses. I'm not going to go into too much detail with my presentation here, because on the agenda after this, we're actually going to work through the previous plan, which is the plan we're going to be updating. So we'll get into a little bit more detail of the different components of each section when we do that. I don't want to take up too much time, but I did want to give you guys a little bit of information as to what it was we're going to be doing. So, and I'm a visual person. Not everybody is, some people are. So I hope this is useful to at least some of you. So towns in Massachusetts, the very first part of the plan, oh, pardon me. Sorry. I'm not going to really touch on section 1 or section 2 because it's a plan summary and an introduction. It kind of goes without saying as to what that is. So we're starting off with section 3, the community setting. For this particular section, some things can change since the last plan, and some information, if you look at the handout, some information will be updated from the community profile or community setting section. Basically, like I said before, an open space and recreation plan is exciting because it includes everything from, recreation resources to your forest, your streams, any natural landscapes, trails, the Squanicook River, for instance, and different recreational uses from fishing to canoeing and kayaking. So it really kind of involves a lot of different people within the community, which is why we have a diverse committee to help guide the plan. The hope is that you guys get excited about it and share it with your neighbors, your friends, and other community members to get their input too, because what we want to end up with at the end is a full community participation for everyone. Some of the pictures here, Mount Watadic and Ashby being a nearby resource that's really well used, I included that. The first part of the community setting is the regional setting. So you want to talk about some of the different regional resources too. Squanicook River obviously is a major resource. The new Squanicook River Rail Trail, since the last report, has really taken off, and it's exciting to see all the things that are happening with that. I imagine it might be a big part of the new plan. Willard Brook State Forest, obviously, Trap Falls, just some examples of some of the resources that Townsend has to offer. So the next one is more of a kind of population dynamics and characteristics. After regional context, we'll talk about the history of the community. The previous plan did a really thorough and good job talking about the actual history of Townsend and how it started, all the way back to the original land grant. So that might not change too much. If the committee thinks that it wants additional detail in there for the sake of posterity, we can add some flavor to that to expand upon it. But it was done pretty thoroughly, I think, in the first report. Population characteristics obviously do change in a 7-year period of time, especially over the last 7 years. It's possible that the population of Townsend changed slightly. That's the type of information we're going to put in. We're going to check the existing plan. We're going to check the current demographics and statistics and make sure we get information up to date and current. Education and housing is another thing that can change. Income and poverty tends to stay in similar brackets, but income and poverty can change as well, especially when you have major events like we did in the mid-2000s, where we had a real, almost a depression, but a real recession. And then most recently with COVID-19, in just a short period of time, you may see some differences in income and poverty in any town. So we'll check on the current statistics and data for that. We'll get that updated as well. Growth and development over time, development slowly changes, and there may be some patterns that have come about or some changes from the last plan. The next section after the community setting is section 4, environmental inventory and analysis. We're going to be looking at things like landscapes, habitats, rivers and streams, lakes and ponds, all the different environmental or natural resources that exist. We're going to take an inventory of that. We're going to see if anything changed since the last plan and make sure we update it accordingly. The pictures here are just some examples of different types of landscape features and environmental characteristics of the community. Another big component of that section is fish and wildlife and insects. We want to do a good job of making sure that the plan thoroughly represents the array of fish and wildlife that exist within a community. It's an important natural resource, especially in a place like Townsend that has a lot of great open space and conservation, forest lands, state parks and things of that nature. Squanicook River being a really great natural resource that's in pretty good condition compared to a lot of the other rivers and streams in the region. The fishing is excellent in the Squanicook River. These are things that you want to highlight in the open space and recreation plan. Again, just pictures, images showing some examples. So the next section, section 5, after environmental inventory, is an inventory of the lands of conservation and recreation interest. So there's two parts of that. There's inventorying the existing conservation lands and recreation lands, and then there's prioritizing additional lands that might not be currently protected, that might be of some value or interest for future protection. That inventory is done by checking the assessor's data and looking at, okay, in the 7 years, 8 years since the last plan, has there been any conservation land added to town land that needs to be updated in this current plan? And then the conservation interests or priorities can be done through looking at the different biological or ecological integrity, or whether or not a property is adjacent to existing conservation land, looking at the individual value of parcels so that any decisions related to potential priorities for conservation, those decisions are made based on existing and real information, not just the fact that it's a large parcel of land and it's up for sale or available, somebody's offered to donate it. What you really want to look at is what is the value of that land? What would it offer to the public if it were to be protected? What are the other potential uses? So kind of looking at the strengths and weaknesses or pros and cons. One way to do that is by assessing available land use planning and prioritization tools and maps that are out there and available. Mass Audubon has a great one that you can make assessments based on a town level review, or you can do it based on a particular watershed like the Squanicook River watershed. So it prioritizes parcels of land based on different criteria that are put in and based on where it is. If you're looking at it just for the town, the priorities might be different than if you're looking at it watershed wide. And sometimes expanding it out to the watershed is good to look at because something may seem important or be important locally, but it may not be as important in the region-wide scale or to the watershed as a whole, or vice versa. It might actually be more important when you're looking at it watershed-wide, and you might not have recognized it as important locally. So these are just different ways to look at things and tools and maps that are available. There's also a lot of information on the biological integrity using the biomap work that was done by the state. Those maps exist for every town here in the presentation, so you guys can go back to it and look at it. I've included links to the Towns in Town report. This biomap will help us with our with part 4 when we're doing our environmental inventory, but it will also help with part 5 when we're looking at lands for conservation priority. And the links should work even in the PDF. I believe the links are active in these documents, so you can follow up on those links in the PDF form that I emailed out to Michael, who then sent it along to you guys. Ecological integrity, if you're not aware or familiar with it, it's just the capability of an area to sustain ecological function over the long term. I don't want to bore you with it, but ultimately there's some lands that offer more ecological value or services both to people and to wildlife than others. So it's kind of ecological integrity sort of covers everything. It's not just looking at biology of one particular species. It's looking more at the ecosystem as a whole and how it functions. And really, that's how things work in our world. You know, everything's kind of related to each other. You can't just look at one particular bird or bat or fish and say that you're going to save or protect something for that. You really need to look at how the ecosystem functions as a whole, the type of habitat they're using, those things, how everything's interrelated. So these maps and tools allow you to do that. Another one is the ecological integrity maps created out of UMass. Again, same thing. There were town maps created and areas ranked based on the different ecological integrity metrics. So I put links in there for the committee to follow up on those and look at those different maps and areas to, again, helping with the inventory and prioritizing potential lands for conservation interest. This one here is similar to the ecological integrity, only its focus is based on more specifically habitat. Those were created by Mass DEP and UMass. There's a link there to those maps as well.
Just for everyone's, so there's a lot of information that's up here on the screen we're going through. There's a lot of different terms. You're not expected to already know this stuff. You're not here representing you're not here as experts in habitat preservation or in conservation or landscape management. As we go through this process, we're going to have kind of information discussions to kind of introduce different tools, techniques, and resources to everybody as we go along. So as you're seeing stuff up on the board, don't think, oh my gosh, I forgot to study for the big test today.
Yeah.
That's not where
There's
we're
no
at.
test.
This is a great job of showcasing how many resources already exist, and we don't need to do any work to get them together.
And what's one where the number 2 pencils were?
That's
No.
100% correct.
I'm like, where am I
100% correct.
circling? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
No.
wondering.
So and again, that's why I put the links in there. Ultimately, these are maps and they're fun. You can go in and play with them. You can look at them. You can download them. You can check them out. You can zoom in and say, oh, wow, this is my neighborhood. What are the different resources that are here and what are the habitat values in this area? Or you may have wondered about this area over here. So it's something to go in and look at. This one here, the last one, pulls them all together sort of. And this was done locally by the North County Land Trust. It pulled together a lot of the information that I just talked about, like the habitat maps, the ecological integrity maps, the biomap habitat, open space lands, and it pulled them all together, and it brought in another important component that is missing from all the other ones, and that's what you see here in orange and black. This is what they called creating connectivity. So these corridors are important areas where it connects to existing open space lands to show where connections can be made. And sometimes preserving a large parcel of land isn't actually what's important. In some cases, it's the stream corridor that connects to already existing parcels of land that might be as important or more important than protecting more land. Connecting existing protecting lands through smaller corridors or conservation easements might actually be more valuable or beneficial than, protecting more land. So I thought this last one was really cool and neat, and it was done by a local land trust who's active in this area. So that one was worth adding in there. And I wasn't aware of it, and it's something that was done more recently. I think they created that in like 2019-ish, thereabouts. So it's a neat tool, it's new, and it pulls everything else together, really. Maybe I should have started with that one. So anyways, we get on now to section 6 and 7. Ultimately, the whole purpose of the information that you're putting into the earlier sections is to develop goals for the community. What are the goals? What are the needs of the community? And that's the part that comes in section 6 and 7. In order to do that, we've created a public survey. We'll talk a little bit about that right after the presentation. The public survey will go out. We'll try to get as much feedback as we can from people in the community. Part of the role we hope you guys can play is, again, getting excited about this, promoting it to your friends and neighbors, and trying to get as many people to take that survey as possible. If you're involved in one of the youth sports leagues, getting that out there to the parents of the league, so that they can get their input in there. We want everybody's voice to be heard. We don't want this to just be guided by this committee or by the Conservation Commission or by one interest group or another. Would really like for the youth sports to get in, the different conservation organizations, your general, Joe and Pam at the coffee shop. I mean, we really want everybody that makes up the community to have some input in this plan. So it's a robust, well-rounded plan that represents the whole community. So get excited about it, share that information. It's sometimes hard to get a lot of people to take a survey, but we're going to shoot for the best participation we can on the survey. And even though I don't work for the town, I don't live in Townsend. I love Townsend and do have some connections to it. But I'm here at your service too. Any way I can help to promote that and get the word out and try to get the survey out there. Lean on me as well. You're not doing this alone. It's a good group of people on the committee. But between Michael, myself, you guys, the wonderful World Wide Web, we'll try to get this out there. And I'm sure there's other ways Townsend promotes these things too.
And if I can just say,
Cable access.
the overall open space and recreation plan is really a vision document. There isn't anything, you don't have to outline, we need this parcel protected by this year using this funds. That's not part of what you guys are in charge of doing. It's really about outlining the vision. And once the document is put together, then administrative staff and other committees will look at it and say, well, we're working on a priority. Does this align with priorities outlined by the open space and recreation plan? Is that something that has been already put forward by the town, their representatives and their committees, to say, this is what we want you to work on over the next 7 years, which is the lifespan of the document. So this is a really amazing opportunity to shape the 7 years of the town and what gets done without actually having to be the person who does all the heavy lifting. So it's a really unique opportunity. What's more, you do have the two of us to help with any heavy lifting you need in that, creating that vision. And so if you're laying out a vision and you feel like, I need a new map, I need a new list, I need something put together, some data set, that's where you can call on us, and we will put that together for you for the next meeting. We'll provide you with those tools and resources so you can make those informed vision decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And It's actually a 5-year plan.
Oh, good, sorry.
It's a 7-year plan if you're doing a full rewrite, which was done last time. And they did a heck of a job with putting as much information as they could in the last plan. So I think the last plan was what they call a major revision or a rewrite, whereas this is just an update. We're going to be adding information where it needs to be added since the last plan. That's not to say that we're going to shortchange the plan in any way. We're going to get as much good information in that we can, as much that needs to be in. Yeah, we'll put in everything that needs to be in there. But ultimately, with an update, it's a 5-year action plan that you develop, and the period and life of the plan is a 5-year plan versus a 7-year for a full major rewrite. So here's some examples in sections 8 and 9. You're ultimately coming up with goals and objectives in a 5-year action plan based on the community vision and needs that we get from the committee here, that we get from the public survey, and the other stakeholders and input that we're able to gather throughout the process. And ultimately, you establish goals and objectives. Michael and I will work hard on that with all the information that you give us, based on the analyses. But here's some basic examples of certain things. I mean, does the town need and want to focus on sidewalk and trail improvements over the next 5 years? Potentially, and these are just examples. They're not anything, that are to be held to anything. But new and improved recreation areas. You want to take your existing parks and playgrounds and recreation areas and improve them and make that the focus rather than finding or building new ones. A lot of towns are now looking for space for dog-friendly open space, or even specifically a dog park, a place specifically for dog walking and dog playing. Some towns choose to have off-leash areas as designated as part of that, fenced in and things. So there's another example of something that can come into the needs and goals and objectives of an open space and recreation plan. Park improvements such as signs and other amenities within your parks and playgrounds. Improvements to the Squanicook River Rail Trail, that might be a focus. Promote use and stewardship of natural resources. Maybe a big focus of this plan. Maybe we have great resources, great areas out there that we already have, but people aren't maybe aware of them to the fullest extent, or maybe the town isn't promoting them as much as they could be. So maybe there's a project where you're doing signage and maps and better information for public outreach on your website and things like that of your open space and recreation areas. Another big one a lot of towns are looking at are improvements in access to lakes and ponds and streams and rivers, for canoeing and kayaking, for fishing, even just for walking and hiking. Town beaches, some towns have a desire to develop or improve in a town beach that used to exist years ago, so stuff like that. So ultimately, it comes down to what do the people of Townsend want and what do the people of Townsend need. And this is a great opportunity to really lay out that vision. And, not every plan and not everything, we do inside the doors and halls and offices and conference rooms of a town hall are that open-ended, where they really involve direct public input for public needs and public desires. So what the community needs and wants. And this is one of those cases where community input, community need really is heard, and it's a big part of the plan, and it's important to coming up with a good plan that, the better of a plan you come up with and the more it represents what people need and want, the more support you'll have to implement it and make it happen. And ultimately, one of the major things with this is having an active and current open space and recreation plan makes you eligible for different state grants that you wouldn't otherwise be eligible for. So yeah, it's about money, and there are a lot of great grants through the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and other state programs that making sure that this is current and up to date makes you eligible for. And if it's not, you're not eligible for it. So one of the goals here is to get some money to do these things, All right, so ultimately, these are the last two sections, public comments and references. Again, public input, once we develop our final draft of the plan, it's going to get sent out one last time or posted on the website for the public to take a look at, comment on it, get any additional feedback. And then, in the end, it will incorporate certain things that might have been missed. And ultimately, you have a happy, healthy community with some great recreational resources, something Townsend's already doing a really good job of. So this plan's only going to improve upon that and make it even better. That's all I have. I will mention, I'll just say it for the record, I mentioned it when I started, I'll say it again. The funding for this open space and recreation update is through a planning assistance grant. So it's not costing the town any money. The state is recognizing the importance of these plans, and if they're going to, require you to have it in order to be eligible for funding, it's nice to see that they have grant programs and planning grants that they're willing to fund these types of things, especially for smaller towns like Townsend that might be constrained with a budget. You're able to do the work, pay MRPC, and have the resources at your disposal that you need to update the plan, get it submitted to the state. So, thank you.
Do we have any questions or stuff we want to just chat about before we move on to the next one? I'm just going to switch over to this so I can see everybody again and stop screen sharing. I'll do that. Oh, stop.
I have a question.
Sure, hold on just 1 second while I figure out what I'm doing. Sorry, everybody. There it is, right at the top. See, we're all learning on this. No one knows everything yet. All right, awesome. So we had a question. Go ahead. Sorry.
When we look at the scope of the land that we're talking about, is it just town land or is it town, state, and federal?
That's an awesome question. Just for checking, did everyone get to hear that remotely? Did they hear that question? Yes, I see some nods. So open space is pretty broad in town. So in Townsend, a lot of the town is owned by state. It's over 30% of the town is owned by state land. That can be included in open space in terms of planning. And so we talked about resources like hiking trails and accessibility of outdoor resources that already exist. Part of the open space plan could be developing, saying we want to have an inventory of what's out there for residents to enjoy and how they can access it. Additionally, there is, beyond the 30+% that's owned by the state, there's nearly another 20% of the town that is already in open space, whether it's in protection under, say, things like Chapter 61, conservation restrictions, all of these things we'll talk about what they are. You're not expected to know these already. But that means that already more than 50% of the town of Townsend is in open space in some way or another. And so what we really get to focus on is how that space is being utilized, what we want to use it for the town. If we want to expand on that open space, we'll talk about the different methodologies. Some of that is owned by the town, some of it's owned by committees, some of it's owned by trusts. We'll talk about the different ownership and what this means. We are not in this committee is not we don't get to say all, do all. It's again, that vision document. It's nice that you get to kind of work. And we can even reach out to external folks who have these resources in hand. So we could have representative from the Conservation Commission, because the Conservation Commission owns several pieces of land. They could come and talk about that. We could have me talk about that if you wanted to, too, because this is something my office does quite a bit. We could have representatives come out talking about open space agriculture and talk about different strategies for that. We could have someone from the state come out and talk about a little bit what they're doing, kind of introduce what they have. Anything that you feel you'd like to have informing you in this kind of as you draft this plan and have any questions. So really, I would say the number one thing is to have good questions just like that. But that's generally what it is. It's a very broad scope, and it includes if we have several subdivisions that have happened in town that are called open space subdivisions, where a certain amount of the property is preserved in open space as part of the subdivision. So that's even privately held and owned land that might have some authority of regulation over it, but still counts as open space within the community. It's a pretty broad term. Does that help answer your question?
Very much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Of course, of course. Anyone else with any questions?
Are you going to email PDF to us?
Yes, so I will make sure that I send the pre-existing open space plan to everybody, as well as everything that Jeff brought in today. I'm sorry I didn't do that before the meeting, just didn't.
Yeah, I only sent it a couple hours before the meeting,
Well,
so.
still on me. I won't get into the story of why I didn't have to, because it's rather embarrassing for myself. It may have involved locking myself out of my office today. It's all right.
I wouldn't have read it until we walked in here.
I know.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Well,
That's what I thought.
the
That's why I came
expectation
around.
was that you were not all already experts on open space in town. You are, however, representatives from each of the different disciplines that should inform open space. So we shouldn't have an open space plan that doesn't consult with water and understand how water use is in town. Because a lot of the town land that's open space is protected for water purposes. We shouldn't do an open space plan without consulting with recreation, because a lot of this land is recreation land. We shouldn't do it without consulting with the Board of Health, the Planning Board, the Historic Committee, whichever you guys represent. That's kind of the reason that we're all here, and in particular at large members, because there are so many broad things. So I'm so glad, for example, James, in addition to being an at-large member, has mentioned that he's representing PESA, which is, a lot of the youth athletics in the town. Kind of falls into that discipline of recreation, but is an outside of town organization in terms of it's not a town, it's not a municipal organization, it's independent community organization. And so those are the kind of people that we want to make sure that we're including their feedback and their representation within the development of this. So as we move forward, we still have another committee member seat open and at large. So if there's someone who wants to step in, or somebody who's been just saying, I wish Townsend did this for some time, this is their time to come in and make that happen. Additionally, these are all open meetings that are open to the public. So public are welcome to come as we start working on different sections and forming subcommittees to kind of work on this or that. People are welcome to step in and serve in that role if the board wants them to. Even you have the authority to delegate who can be involved in the process. But it is something that it's not just solely on your shoulders. It's something that's it's a great opportunity to get a better understanding about open space in Townsend, and also help make sure that community residents, through different things like the survey, have the ability to give their feedback, which seems like a pretty good transition over to the survey.
Yeah, and I'll follow up with one more thing to elaborate on what you said a little bit earlier, and gets to kind of your question, is that this is in no way a regulatory document. What goes into this document is, like Michael said, it's a vision, it's goals and objectives. It's a vision for what the community would like based on what the community needs are and the input we get. But it is in no way a regulatory document or anything that you identify in here as potential priorities. You're not going to be held to pursuing or acquiring certain properties for conservation, or if the open space plan says that they're interested in developing a dog park, it doesn't mean that the state's going to require you in any way to develop a dog park. These are just sort of visions and ideas. So you're not held to anything that you identify in the plan. You're looking at ways to identify community needs and the vision for potentially, meeting those needs down the road. But it's not obligatory or regulatory in any way. It's a vision plan.
And you'll see as you go through the previous document how that kind of played out. Looking at previous goals that are outlined, there are properties that they identified that should be preserved that the state just came in and bought. We didn't have anything to do with it, but it's preserved. We didn't do it, but it got accomplished. The one that was great is I think there's one vision about the idea of talking about a rail trail here in town. And as we all know, we have a really great rail trail that's already being established that is being led by the Squanicook River Greenways folks. So they're already taking charge on that. It was just a goal that was outlined that has happened to be accomplished. But we didn't necessarily have to be the driving force. It wasn't that the open space committee needed to figure out how to do it. On the other end, there are things that were outlined in that plan that you will notice are not already in town. And that's also very common that have happened. So you're setting broad vision, and who knows what we are able to accomplish. I think we should, I'd love it if we accomplished everything that you guys lay out for us, and that's going to be my goal. But if something comes up, we have my office being vacant for 3 years. Like some things won't happen quite as well as they thought they were going to have happen. This is a really great opportunity, like I said, to outline vision without having to worry about the pressure of figuring out how it's going to happen and making you feel like you are the ones that has to make it happen. But it is a great opportunity to speak up for the stewardship of the community and inspire that stewardship.
Exactly.
So
Well said. Well said. So to the public survey, I've taken there was a public survey done for the last plan. It's a requirement of the plan. They require you to get public input. The way it's typically done is through a public survey. So there was a pretty comprehensive public survey drafted. It's one of the appendices of the plan that was done in 2013. We're going to go through it a little bit. We've taken that survey and put it into a Survey Monkey, and we're starting to create a digital online survey that can be posted and go live out to the public. We haven't done that yet because we want to get your feedback on it. I wanted to introduce the idea of it, and we didn't want to go ahead with any surveys before a committee's been established. We technically, the plan starts today. We've pulled together some information, and I think we can have a survey ready pretty quickly. We'll put it out to you guys first to review it and have your chance to say, hey, this question is a little bit confusing, or this question's no longer, valid since the last plan it was accomplished, or it's no longer really a hot topic. Or you might think, these questions don't address this particular concern that we've seen over the last few years, or that this youth sports program might have a certain, type of question or concern that the questions don't reflect that. So we tried to keep them pretty broad and general to cover everything. But we may have missed some things, and we want your feedback and input on it too, to make it the best public survey we can get. And then the big thing will be any ideas you have as to how we can get people excited about taking it. The hope is that it doesn't take more than 10 minutes. It shouldn't, a survey that takes more than 5 or 10 minutes,
I was gonna ask about
yeah.
that.
So,
The previous survey is like 12 pages long.
yeah, how many questions?
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I was literally excited to have questions. It's a lot.
So I don't think ours is that long, so,
This whole stack.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a lot. Nobody's gonna do that.
yeah. We don't have 100 questions, I know
Yeah,
that.
it's a really a lot.
So that's a good example of a priority that your committee gets to decide is how accessible you want to make this plan. If you look at this plan, it's got a ton of good information, but it's difficult to know what is the most important thing to read and what is just some great information to have. And in the structuring of the plan, the committee, get to decide, do we want our surveys to be comprehensive, or do we want to make sure we get to the core of things? Do we want to have open-ended questions or listed or multiple choice? Do we want to highlight one section and kind of fade another section of the plan, kind of move it backwards so it's less seen in the plan? And so there's a lot of opportunity to kind of make sure that, however you guys feel that this should be presented, whether you want it to be accessible to residents, a good guidance document, whatever standards you guys want to set, that's the standards that we all work to. So it's a really good way to start asking those kind of questions. It's like, hey, this sounds great. Does it actually work? And that's how you can kind of start measuring some of the things if that's what you want to be working on.
And making sure recreation gets its place in the report, because I'll be honest, most of these reports overlook recreation, which is, in my opinion, what the main goal and theme of the report should be, right? And I'm guilty of it in my own presentation. And I realized it as I was putting it together, and adding some slides, an hour before I came out here, and I said, man, I didn't have time, but I was like, I should have more slides in here on recreation. And I had in the original presentation that I took this from for another town, I had a whole section on recreation. Of course, I was biased. I was working in that town at the time, so I knew everything there was to know. And I'll be honest, I don't know everything about Townsend's parks and playgrounds and recreation. So that there's about 5 slides that are missing to make that equal as it should be. But I'm not the only one guilty of it. Almost every open space and recreation plan you look at statewide is light on recreation and really heavy on the conservation side of things. And I come from a conservation background, but my opinion of conservation is it's land that people should use for hunting, fishing, hiking, mountain biking, all of those things. It's not land that should just sit there just to grow trees. There are some areas that are for that and that can be set aside for that. But when you say conservation and recreation, they're together with the and in the middle for that reason, because it's not one or the other. It's both, and it's also both together. And I think that's an important thing to realize and to help with promoting the process of updating this plan, not just for updating the plan, but also for how the land is used down the road. And a lot of these conservation properties, even the state properties, have trails, mountain biking trails, and these are allowable uses on those areas. So thinking about how conservation land also contributes to recreation and to economic development of the community too, because they bring in people visiting the community, and it generates revenue, real revenue for the community. So environmentalism or conservation land doesn't always have to have a negative connotation to it. You've got to think about what the real big picture is. It's not just land that's there so that nobody can go out and use it. It's actually the opposite. It's public land for public good that the public can go out and use. You know,
We'll talk about some examples of how that's been true in the past and how different lands and open space in town, some are outlined for recreation, some are outlined for conservation, some are both at the same time, and why there's a distinction with one another. There are some great examples we've had recently of big wins where conservation and recreation have both been served simultaneously because they were non-exclusive, because that can be the kind of thing that is a measurement. And that's true for a lot of other disciplines as well. So you guys get to decide kind of the scope, the focus, what you think is important and what your priorities are. But don't think it's an either or. Don't think I don't know a lot about conservation, I need to go study that. You can really keep it to that point where you're thinking about what is it that I, as a Townsend resident, as a Townsend representative, what do I think the town needs? What do the townspeople of Townsend think they need? And how do we make that the thing that happens? So it's really great.
and I'd like to see this be an open space and recreation plan that could be called a recreation and open space plan. We're not going to convince the state to change the order of things, but I'll admit it, they're all heavy on the conservation side and less heavy. So I'm hoping we get a lot of good input from recreation, from the youth sports groups and things. And I'd really like to see that be a big part of this plan, to get recreation in there at a level that it deserves to be, so that when the state reviews it, even they say, oh, wow, you know, we got to make sure it's a well-rounded plan. And that's going to be my challenge for figuring out how to work it into the plan, in a formatting way and everything else. But it will be your challenge to give me the information I need to do it, and to get that information from the public so that we can get that in there, you know.
That's a great transition into 2.4, which is a preliminary review of the previous open space plan. And we will, for the survey, we'll make sure that we send that out. I will make sure I actually send it out to you guys so you can look at it and we can have some comment and some review time about it before we send it out to the public. Just for, because it's a common question, under open meeting law, we can't have, say, an email or a communication with all the committee members without being in an actual meeting. And so for a lot of communications, you kind of hub them through me. So if there's a document that Jeffrey wants to send out to all of you guys, then he sends it to me, and I one by one send it to all of you guys to make sure that you all have it. We want to make sure that we preserve that open meeting so that anyone who wants to be involved in this process and witness the process happening isn't missing things that are happening behind the scenes. It's want to be open and transparent. So that's why a lot of stuff you'll see coming from me. And in you guys, if you're like, hey, I found a cool map, or here's a resource, or here's my draft notes, you'd send it to me, and I'd pass it around to folks to kind of preserve that. But kind of moving into the preliminary review of the previous open space plan. The previous open space plan is incredible. They did an amazing job on how much detail and how robust it is. They did a lot of the heavy lift for us. There are, as if you guys have started to pick through it, you've seen that there are some sections that are very data rich. There's a lot of background information. And so as you guys kind of go through that, you'll begin to see how much information you have. So in a lot of ways, a lot of the work has already been done. There's an entire section in this that is on the soil of Townsend. And I don't think that's changed extensively in the last X number of years. If anyone really wants to spend 3 weeks sitting down and going through the soil inventory of Massachusetts and Townsend, I will sit with you and work with you. But if that's the kind of thing you're like, no, I feel pretty good about that, we can leave it as it is and just kind of review it and make sure it's current.
It's a 200-page report for Worcester and Middlesex County.
Please don't ask me to do that. I will if you ask me to, but please don't ask me to do that. No, I'm just kidding. So it's a great opportunity. But as you kind of go through, there are various sections to look at. As Jeff mentioned, sections 1 or 2, the beginning, are actually probably the best ones to skip to start with, because they kind of pull the rest of the document together in some ways. And it's kind of difficult to read if you start front to back. There's section 4 on soils, which I mentioned. You can read that and see if there's some insights, but again, that's probably not going to be the best place to start for informing your decisions. You don't want to necessarily start from the ground up on this. But in particular, there is one section in here that I absolutely love to see, which was section 6, which is the community vision section. And I don't have this, it's on the plan if you guys have it in there. Otherwise, I have one right here if anyone wants it. I have a couple of these. It is on page 54 of the plan. So I love that they included this because this is basically what the previous committee did, if anyone wants this, what the previous committee did and their process that they went through. And so it's a great way where they kind of stopped and said, well, what were the problems? How did we figure them out? What did we do? What did we like? And so it's really amazing to see captured that it was included. Because you can read it and you can get very much an idea of the committee that's formed previously sat exactly where we sit right now. With our first day, we elected a chair and a vice chair and a clerk, and we don't know what's next. So this is an exact way to kind of go through that. And you can see how this really structures it well, where it talks about statement of what its priorities are, statement of goals, and then starts analyzing what is needs that we really have for council. And that section 6 and chapter 7 really are the core of the document in a lot of ways, because that's where you start with the problem statement. And then after that, you start working out, why is the problem? What's the priority versus other things? There are a lot of things this can address, and obviously we want it to be as comprehensive as possible, but some things might not be the priority right now compared to others, depending on what you decide is the priority. And so that's a great place to start looking at it. There is other sections that are larger and data rich. Like there's a huge section on inventory of lands and towns that has all of the town lands, including acreages that are in chapter 61, chapter 61A, chapter 61B, conservation restriction, town ownership, whether they're brownfields or not. All of that is really hard to read, especially if you don't know what any of those things are. That list is already getting updated by me in my office. That's already getting done. And
Yeah,
so,
not much of that is going to change, except for anything that's new additions to it.
So, and those kind of things, that's where we are your resources. If you feel like you need information, that's where we're going to come in. And I'm going to plan on having a certain amount of briefing on some things. So I think you guys are going to see a lot, some background on what is zoning and how does that apply, what can and cannot happen, what is a conservation restriction, what are some tools for farmland protection if we want to pursue that, what is an area of critical environmental concern, which is more of the town than you'd expect. A lot of these things that help inform this document. We'll just kind of have like informal briefings, like, hey, here's your first pass rundown. This is your, just take it. We're going to take 20 minutes and walk through this, answer some questions. If you guys have follow-up questions, we'll have more information, but I don't want to inundate you with, oh, here's 5 textbooks. I expect you all to memorize them for next week. So that's what I really wanted to just kind of have as a preliminary. So I would say between now and the next committee meeting, definitely take some time and just kind of go through the document, highlight, as some of you have already done, things that you're like, this is great. Highlight some things that you're like, this doesn't seem relevant anymore. Make some notes, but in particular, draft up questions. Because that's really where we should start, is asking questions about what do we need, what do we want, what does this mean? This is a great time to do that. You guys will all be experts by the end of this, I promise you. So kind of going through it at kind of I wanted to kind of keep it at a broad level tonight, because I know you're all taking in a lot of information. And you're all worried about the thing you don't know about, as opposed to focusing on the thing that you're already an expert on. But you'll all know what you're talking about. Don't worry, you've got us as resources to go forward with it. So, is there anything that anyone wants to spend a couple minutes focusing on? Does anyone already have a question about the previous plan? And they're like, I need to know about X, Y, and Z, because we can talk about that. Or you can just say, Mike, get me some more information for next time. We'll get it for you, I promise. So, anyone have any questions at this point? Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so one of the things that we're going to have in addition to the committee members we have is we have a lot of opportunity for subcommittees. So there'll be time when there will be work sessions where you're drafting languages, people revising it, and you might want to, some sections might be opportunity where you want to have more people come in and help out. So you're welcome to have other residents joining subcommittees. The committees themselves, excuse me, can form subcommittees where you can say, I'm really interested in conservation and recreation, but I'm not really interested in, say, agriculture or woodlands. And so you can kind of divide it up. So you might be someone who's more interested in open space zoning. And so that could be a work group that you want to work on with 1 or 2 of the other members and other people from the community as well. As we kind of set up a structure going forward, that's a great way to move forward. I would say, like I said, go through the document and see what you're interested in. So we might find that everything's already covered. No one has to volunteer for something they don't necessarily know a lot about and don't want to know a lot about. You'll all have a great informational working knowledge by the end of this on all of these aspects. But if you're like, I want to zero in on this one thing, because this is my thing, then that's a great opportunity to start pulling that out and seeing what that is you would want to work on and lead the charge on. So that's where we've got these subcommittees to form, and that's, again, we can decide how we want to structure those moving forward.
It's not required.
It's not required. It's
if you're-
often easier.
If you're finding that that meeting once a month isn't enough and not everybody needs to or wants to meet, and you want to meet with just one or two or three people that have an interest in or more knowledge in this, or if there's an outside person that you're finding you keep going to get input from, then maybe you form a subcommittee so that they can meet once a week or every couple of weeks, and the whole open space committee doesn't have to meet. Again, it's not required.
Mm-hmm.
The state recommends it, but you'll find, I think, the level of need for it, whether it's something you want or need to do, and work through that with Michael and each other, and decide if it's something you want to
And a
do.
lot of these will form very organically as you're working through the process.
Exactly.
You'll be like, hey, I'm really curious about endangered species in town. Let's form a subcommittee to learn more about that specifically. And then that subcommittee can form the broader committee. That way everyone doesn't have to do every piece of research.
Yeah.
But as you work through in the future, it's one of the things we don't necessarily pick at the first meeting because it's a huge landscape and it's hard to know which one is which. But once you kind of work through it, you start zeroing in on, okay, this is an area I think we need a little more expertise on, or this is an area that I really want to see well developed. Let's form a subcommittee on. So that's where it kind of forms, and it's at your discretion of how that goes forward.
And probably more important with a major rewrite, where you're rewriting an entire plan, or you're deciding you need to really expand on something, some level. Whereas if we read through the report, the plan, the previous plan, and we think it's pretty comprehensive and has most of the information, but what we're really looking to get in are new visions and goals and ideas based on today, and the flavor of the community today, then it might not require a lot of legwork from subcommittees, because you might not be having to pull together a lot of new information. It might just be a couple comments, a couple things, and we're going to really just kind of focus as a committee as a whole on the visions and goals part of it, and we're going to use the input from the public survey and the community to help guide that.
I
So
don't mean to keep picking on it, but if we want to have a soils subcommittee, we can have a soils subcommittee. That's the perfect example, I think, of very compartmental information. So we're going to keep bringing it up.
and I don't know what night the soils subcommittee meets on, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure I'm busy that night.
Yeah, I've checked my calendar.
It really is.
Um,
Those soils reports are unbelievably detailed. I can't believe they're like 200-page reports. And, it's crazy, all the information that goes into it.
And if there is something like that that we want to talk about, and not just soils, but other things too, I've already had people from different state organizations and organizational groups offer to come forward and do presentations and informational tools to let you guys know what the resources are, how these things are often evaluated, and what is prime agricultural soil and what importance is played towards agriculture and open space. You may not want to have a soils committee, but that's probably something that might come up in a conversation at some point. And if you want to have someone from the USDA come in and do an informational educational, I'm the one that can set that up for you. You just tell me to do it and it gets done. It might not get done right away, but I can get it done.
And that's a good example.
That's a great example.
Prime agricultural soils, prime farmland soils.
Yeah.
And prime forest lands. That's a good
This is a
example.
good example of how something that seems broad and unimportant can get specific. When you get into a specific facet, you might interact with and you might want more information on.
Can I say something about prime agricultural soils?
I love you, Veronica.
Jeff, I know that your MRPC is right next to where North County Land Trust is. They did an agricultural soils study, which included Townsend, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And so it might be worth checking in with them to see if they have those maps and that information. They had a grant and worked on that.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with I haven't read their reports or seen the maps, but I'm familiar with that project, and I know they did it for a number of towns, and I think they did a pretty good job of it. And so there's a good example of something that's been done since the last plan that probably
Yes.
should get incorporated in. So I'll make a note of that one.
Another example of something that could be maybe highlighted more in this
Thank you.
plan, if needed, is, I see Dave up there, water. We've had a lot of talk in town about water, about PFAS in water. I'm sure some of you guys who are residents have heard a lot of discussion. Might be something you don't know a lot about, but those kind of things might inform a lot of decisions we make in terms of open space. And so that could be the kind of thing that we could even have David come forward and do a discussion, or have someone from the water committee come and talk. So as we kind of go through, you guys will start having those, like I said, go and come forward with questions. That's exactly what that is. If you just don't feel foolish asking, it's great to ask these questions, because then it gives me a homework that I can come and make sure that you guys have the right information, not inundation, but information that you need to make an informed decision and when you're setting these guidance documents, for sure. So, so that's fantastic. So I think that covers all of the work session. We're gonna move, what's that? You get more questions?
No, I just don't want to point to ponder on this.
I would love to, yeah.
I just love to, so I read through this one. I'm super obnoxious. I'm sorry, guys. I'm wicked nerdy. So I read through this one, and I've actually read through Sterling. So I want to throw that out as an example. Sterling's open space and recreation plan reads more like a vision document than a data report, which makes it more palatable and easier to function off of. So I just wanted to throw that out there. The other thing that came up actually when I was working on a grant committee, somebody had said that to keep in mind that when you're working on something and putting something together, changing something and improving something doesn't always mean you're adding things. Quite often, and our mindset is automatically to add data and add things, but in a lot of times, in order to improve or change something, you're actually taking things away. So when we go through the document, I think even with the subcommittees, we need to not just, okay, what can we add to what's already in there, but what might not be relevant any longer. So I just want to throw those in there since we're going through this vision part of it, the goal part of it. It's a different mindset than just adding and putting more in, to sort of swap it out maybe and even change the tone a little bit to data centric to action centric.
And that, I mean, I know Concom has a bunch of random parcels all over town that are small.
Mhm.
You know, do they need to, hold those, or could they be sold off to abutters? If they're small little parcels, generate revenue, but
Oh, yeah.
So that's the kind of thing we can talk about
Yeah.
Because of the
in
cost.
thinking about, what are these, and when we kind of work, there will be some times when I'll come in and I'll talk to you about the different kinds of parcels in this town. I think between different committees, there's hundreds of different parcels. We can talk about what they're used for, what kind of regulations are on them, who controls them, and you can kind of set priorities going forward. We'll also talk about things, so a lot of people make comments about how the state has a lot of land in town, and like I mentioned, they have more than 30% of the town. They do also pay pilot taxes, which are not actually taxes. The state doesn't have to pay taxes, but they pay something called pilot, which is payment in lieu of taxes. So there is revenues that come in. And so we'll talk about how there's a lot of different funds and revenue streams that are generated in connection with open space, what that means, how we can executively, not necessarily decide how they're spent because they're not our funds, but we can say, well, this is what we think is a priority. Do we think the priority should be more acquiring new lands, reducing lands, or just make sure we have more efficient management and accessibility on the properties? So that's, again, something that we can kind of, you can very much decide as we kind of move forward. And to build off of something Emmy said, if you guys have worked with me in all of my department yet, I love having public engagement and making everything accessible to the public. That is my soapbox. I will stand on as much as you let me until you shove me off of it. And so anything you want to do in terms of making this accessible to the community members, whether it's framing or actual substance of what we're doing on the ground, I will wholly support that. And I can bring in folks to talk about how do we make this, we can talk to folks from other towns. And maybe other towns can come to us and say, well, this is ours and this is what we like. And this is the thing we, procedurally we discovered halfway along the way that we figured out would have been better to start with. We can get that guidance from other communities. And Jeff is a community, works with the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission. That's a community-wide. So we are already getting the benefit of a lot of different towns going through this process that we can kind of draw on through him, which is why it's great that we have him as a resource.
Yeah.
So
I'll have to check. I'm not positive. We've done a lot of stuff with Sterling. We may have worked with them on that plan. I don't know. I'll look into it, but I'm going to read their plan anyways. It was one of the ones on my list, but
There's
it's,
actually, theirs is really sounds more recreation and open
Cool.
spaces.
Yeah.
It's definitely more palatable and it's definitely more visionary,
Yeah.
like actual
Wow.
visionary than this is what we have. This is an option.
Like a book report. I like what you said. I mean,
it's much.
you don't need to sugarcoat it. You know, that was
Yeah.
perfectly said. And you know what? When I was saying, wow, this plan was thorough, comprehensive,
It's awesome.
you're right. But it does read like a
Hard.
book report. So finding a way to format it in a way, I'm glad you made that point. That's what these meetings are for and what the committee's for. Yeah, make it more exciting and interesting, more like a vision plan and an action plan rather than a book report.
And some of that can be more than just more or less. It can be just,
Yeah.
do we really need the inventory plans in the middle of the document or can it? get into
Well,
the
you can't
appendices?
change that.
Yeah, well, okay, there are some,
Yeah.
but like.
There's certain things the state requires a format. We have
Yeah.
to meet, but they don't say anything about, one thing a lot of people are doing, a lot of towns and you know, engineering firms, consultants, environmental consultants, is they're creating complementary documents, a vision story map that can be looked at, and it reads more like a PowerPoint slide or a series of slides that you scroll through with some information. It's like an executive summary almost, but it's a real visual type report. And it's called a story map because it has a back end of GIS. So you're pulling up maps and information as part of the report. It's a better way to present information. And a lot of people are skipping the whole plan and doing just that. But a lot of other people are also, because we're required to have this format and all these things, components in it for the state, there's nothing saying, aside from the effort, and I don't know how much funds are in there, but I'll work hard to try to come up with something like that. And even if we can't do it, it's nothing to say that we can't work together, you know, on a secondary type, find a small grant or small DLTA or something to create a story map that goes with it, because you want something that the public's going to actually read and enjoy. You don't want a plan that's going to collect dust on a shelf, and which is what most of our plans do. And that sucks to say when you're the guy writing, you know.
That's the
but it's
perfect
true.
example of things you can outline as priorities. So Townsend has, you may have seen in the plan, there's this giant like 5-page list of all the different types of open space. We don't have a map.
Yeah.
We have lists of parcels, but I can't turn on my computer and pull up the map that shows all of them together. That feels like something that the Open Space Committee could definitely say, yeah, we should have that in town. And then you say we do it. And then once the plan is finalized, I say, I have to devote time to making sure we have this because I was told by my committees that this is a priority for Townsend. And it's something that we're working on internally because it's a priority for Townsend anyway. But it's the kind of thing that in shaping that, do you want the map to be a resource that only town employees can utilize? Do you want to have a story map version that's accessible to the public so they can see, just open up the map of Townsend, turn on the layer for hiking trails and say, where are the hiking trails near my house? Like these are the kind of things that you can outline as vision priorities without having to actually then sit down and build the GIS map. That's not something you have to do. You just get to tell someone else to do it, which is beautiful for you guys. That's why I know I pitched to each of you the same idea. This is really what it comes down to is you guys get to set what you want and then the town does it.
Fitchburg State has an excellent GIS program. Maybe there's a student looking for an internship that wants to take your open space plan and turn it into a story map and develop maps, you know. So there's options for that, you know.
Yeah. So I know I teased that we were moving on to next meeting. We will pick a date for our next meeting, but I'm just going to take the moment to kind of make sure that everyone knows that y'all have a little homework, I will say.
What can I add one thing?
Oh, please go for it.
James, you made a good point too. So I wanted to just address it. When conservation commissions end up with these leftover parcels from a development, say that was done in the 80s or something, and they say, well, I can't develop this little piece, so we're just going to give it to the Concom. It's not always the best thing to, you know, but that's how it was done for years, right? You had Concoms would just take the leftovers, right? Out of convenience because, well, you know, or they were looking at this huge parcel of land. We're going to go after that just because it's big. And it turns out it might not be ecologically important, right? I mean, and these little ones that are here, and they're not connected aren't really contributing much value. So that's the important part about the prioritizing potential priorities. Again, not anything that you're saying we have to or we will, but saying, look, this makes more sense. These lands are really valuable for these reasons, and they have, or they protect these certain things, or they provide a connection between these areas. And so identifying them here as priorities will help, hopefully in the future, to eliminate, conservation land for convenience, or just because it's left over, it's what was left on the plate, because it doesn't make sense. And once it's conservation land, it stays that way. It's protected. So you can't then take it out and then, so coming up with good priorities for good reasons makes sense. Using the tools and maps that are out there, and they're not as intimidating as they look here. Click on the links and check them out. I mean, they're easy to use, and you can play with them. You can add different things, or larger areas, smaller areas, focus on wildlife versus connectivity and all those things. So coming up.
The GIS maps are very comprehensive, so.
Yeah.
They aren't that hard to use.
Yeah.
Have the ability to overlay.
Yeah.
On satellite images. Much
Yeah.
easier now.
Yeah.
Especially now where everybody's using it in their car for
And that's-
GIS, right?
That's one of the
GPS.
things that in 2013, technology wasn't the point where it was assumed that, oh yeah, we should have a GIS map that's accessible to the public. So the planning, the space plan didn't say to make that priority because it didn't really exist. Now it is.
Yeah.
You could decide that we want to have trails with QR codes at every place. And you know what? That certainly wasn't an option in
Wouldn't it be
2013.
cool to have all of our trails on all trails? Like,
Again, these are all the things you can decide to do.
And look at you've got Street View in Google,
So the state has started to do that with the trails in town, where you can go on the GIS and click on the trail, wherever will tell you the condition, the
Yeah.
width, the type of, path material.
Mhm.
So
And a lot of resources just like that already exist, but they haven't been brought together in one place that is accessible for Townsend. So I could probably find every piece of information on a map somewhere, but it would take me a week to find them all, and then I have to
Yeah.
run forward programs
And
to
how do you
find
get
them.
it to the public?
That's the
Yeah, right,
Actually,
right.
matters more than
Yeah.
just being in our document.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not usable if the public can't access it.
All right, I want to be respectful of people's time. So for the next meeting, for homework, number one, absolute most big priority. If you guys, when you signed up, when you went down to Clerk and got sworn in, she gave you some information on ethics training and board committees. Take some time and look through that. That's really paramount, that you understand what you're allowed to do in open meeting, what you're not allowed to do, what your responsibility is for the town. That is a big thing that all committees are required to do. So that is definitely something for homework that I really encourage you all to take the time to go through. Some of you, if you've already been on other committees, may already be up to date. You can talk to the clerk. You might already have ethics training. You might already have open space committee training. You might not need to do anything. So I suggest that you check the clerk. She has the records of all of that. We are going to share the drafted public survey, so you guys can look at that and start forming some opinions on that. We're going to make sure that if you don't already have it, you can email me and I'll make sure you have an up-to-date copy of the previous open space plan, and kind of start combing through that and saying, all right, let's start looking at some sections. What seems interesting to me? What do I feel like it is? Really develop those questions. And that's really where we definitely want to be taking home, is come back with some questions about what you want to see, some things you need more information on, or why was this a priority? Or did we ever do this? That kind of stuff. That's a really good idea. Some of you are already awesome and are experts at this and have gone through the plan, looking at our chair here.
Oh, yeah, but
She already knows
doesn't mean I'm an
everything.
expert, because
So a
I
lot
know
of things we will end up
I have
having
more
some.
questions than I understood.
I'm looking at Emmy because I can be long-winded, and I know we based the survey on the previous survey, so I'm counting on you to help us say, what's fluff, what doesn't need to be there?
Yeah.
Take a look at it, and even before you see the one we have, because I guarantee you the one I have is gonna be too long. It's based on that one. So if there are things in there that are fluff, that don't need to be there, if you have any ideas, we'll take them.
So Mike, I have an idea. I watched your presentation, and you have a bunch of ideas, but there's no linking it together. So the idea is, for a long-term goal, is you have the bike path, which is being made now. For everything, what you don't have is you don't have parking spots, and you don't have any linkage to parks or anything else. So there's actually one project up by the high school that is for 9 trailers for food trucks. what we can probably maybe do is, since that abuts the bike path, to get an easement for a walkway on the property to go through. And then later on, when they put the sidewalk in, you can get to the high school and park, but always think in terms of how can we link all this together? How can we link the park? How can we link town land? How can you do the bike path, the dog park, and link it to the bike path? So it's all one comprehensive piece and not done in pieces. That everything, all products anywhere near the bike path or a park, how can we link these projects together in the long term? It shouldn't all be separate ideas. It should be one idea in one grouping. And how can you make it work together?
I like that idea of bringing up a principle of linkages and setting that as a priority if that's something the committee wants to do. I would say definitely, though, don't try and let yourself get too specific on specific things. Because if you say, I want to prioritize one specific thing, and then we go out and do that, what are we doing for the next 4 years? And so that's why you want to keep things lofty. As we kind of work through this, you will obviously identify areas that you're like, this is really the thing that links it all together, or this is the parcel that's the most important. This is the recreational resource we want to provide that's not being provided. Whatever it happens to be, you can set those specific goals, but I would say make those the last things you develop and start with those broader goals, because those things, if you say, I want to preserve parcel 33F on the map, and then we preserve it, what are we doing for the next 5 years? And so that's why we want to make sure we have broad goals in a lot of ways that then can be zeroed down to the specifics, because we might wrap up this plan, say we're all done, great job, and the next day a great opportunity comes up that none of us had considered anymore. And we might not have specifically included it. But if it's guided by those broader visions that are laid out, that allows us to say, okay, here we know how to approach this. The committee has already given us insight as to what we should be prioritizing. That's a great, and I would say keep up with those. Colby, do you have a question?
I do. If David's question has been answered, yes. Should I go ahead?
Yeah.
Am I on mute? All right,
Colby.
I'll spit it out. I have a question about the survey and how the questions are being formed. Are you looking for yes and no questions, or multiple choice, or narratives? What is the approach?
We're trying to do less narratives and more of, there's some yes and no questions, but there's a lot of questions that are more of kind of like ranking or level of importance, like kind of like a matrix, like how concerned are you about this, or how important do you think this is to the community, where you select a level of, very important, somewhat important, neutral or indifferent, not very important, or not important at all, things like that. There's going to be questions more like that, so that we can actually do some analysis on the questions and try to rank them and score them to get at what people are really valuing or what they think is important. There's one question in there that just asks to list the different types of athletic fields or recreational resources that the community currently has, or how satisfied are you with current things, but very little narratives or kind of comments where we're looking for written, statements.
And following up on that, when you do get I guess they're kind of assumptions when you get back the surveys. How do we verify that they're accurate? Are we relying on online resources like just GIS mapping, or do we have people with expertise in the field at our disposal or to use as resources? Does that make sense?
Well, we're really just asking for people's opinions on certain topics. We're not really asking anybody to give us any definitive data, or we're basing it on people's opinions of, say, a particular sport or resource, or how often they're using things, or how important they think things are. So they're subjective to the level that we're looking for people's input on what they value, what they feel is important, so we can get at community needs. But we're not really asking them to provide us with any data where they could be giving us information that isn't accurate or is skewed in any way. So we're asking more general questions, not really data questions. So there's really no right or wrong answer, I guess.
These surveys are a great way for you on the committee to get information broadly about the town from town residents and get broad consensus. They are not, this is what you have to do. They are, if someone outlines that they want their backyard to be cleared of trees, you don't have to say, we're going to put that in the plan. If someone says, I want a dog park, but I want it to be next door to me, it doesn't have to be next door to me, even if you put in a dog park. But it is a great way to get an understanding of what the town appreciates as a priority. I see one vote for the dog park on the screen right now. It is a great way to get an idea, and it's a great time for the community to say, I feel like we need more recreational resources or more accessibility. We need more wetlands protected. We need more forests, whatever it is that they happen to feel strongly about. That's when they can kind of start informing that, in addition to, whatever amount of information you want to have them come in at the meetings.
Yeah. So somehow, some way, you really have to try to get as many people to take the survey as possible, and as many different people with different backgrounds as possible, so that it truly is representative. And I don't have the answer for that. That's the hardest thing that any community faces. But I know Townsend's excellent, so maybe we're going to solve it as part of this plan. Probably not highly likely, but in all seriousness, we've got to try to work hard to get it out to as many people as we can. Because what happens a lot of times is you'll see one group that's really active will take the survey, and they'll get the word out to all of their members or the people that are in allegiance with their group. And then, yes, the survey can be sort of swayed towards that one opinion or influenced, I guess,
Yeah, soil.
The soil scientists of West Townsend are the big, but really though, you want everybody to take it, and you want groups to get all of their friends to take it, but you want to make sure you get multiple groups and all people, because you do want a representation. So that's why it's important to share it far and wide, so that we're trying to get a good diversity of the population.
We can use pre-existing resources in distributing these surveys as well. So you're all representatives of committees that already have other town residents on there. You can just bring back your own committees and have them fill out the surveys. They can have their families turn out the surveys, and then everyone else's families can fill out. We can pass it along. I've only been working in Townsend for 3 months, but one of the things I can say is it certainly seems like everyone has an opinion about what Townsend needs. And this is that time. What's that? I will look into that and make sure. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to say yay, nay, unless I'm 100% certain. That's something else to learn about me, is I don't say something if I don't know it's true. But I will figure out what we can use for resources for that. And I know somebody who does a lot of outreach activities and the MSU who might be able to give us resources on how to connect with folks. We have a lot of great resources that we can tie into this. All right, I did promise next meeting. I swear, you guys, we're going to get you out of here at some point. Next meeting. So you all have some idea of what you want to be looking at and going forward, start developing those questions. When do we want to have our next meeting, everybody? What is the timeline for folks? I picked today. This is a Tuesday evening for this meeting because no one else was already in a committee meeting. This is the off week from the Board of Selectmen meeting. The Board of Selectmen meets every other week. Planning Board meets on every other week on Mondays. Conscom meets every other week on Wednesdays. Second and fourth, you're right, technically. Then there's all of you represent different committees, so it's going to be a little bit of a minefield to find. We won't always be able to meet. There will be some weeks, especially as we get into the summer, where we all are like, hey, we got this on the calendar, and 5 of us are on vacation that week, and we just won't have it happen. You are all appointed through the next town election. I don't think it's going to take that long. I think that we can get this. I said to a lot of you guys, I think we'll probably be working on this through December because I expect there'll be a couple of months we just don't get together. But you guys could be awesome and get it done in 3 months. I'm not saying that, that's the right way to do it, but you could do that. Or you could say, no, we want to take our time with it and spend 2 years on this, which I'm not sure anyone wants to do either. There's a lot of different ways to go forward. It might
We
be.
have a year.
Yeah,
but
it might be a good idea at this early stage to plan on another month, and then you guys can start going through it really substantively and take your time, have some conversations. Reach out to me, reach out to Jeff, and start giving us an idea of what you want us to prepare for the next meeting. We can get that set us up together. We might decide once we get rolling and we've got good momentum, we want to meet more frequently or less frequently or on a different day. It's really up to you guys to decide, and this is where it's going to be the trickiest thing, because this is like picking pizza toppings at a big party. It's the hardest thing to do. So do we want to meet in the evenings? Do we want to meet in the days? Do we want to meet Sundays? Please not.
No.
So what is the situation for everybody? Does anyone have any insights as to what works better for them or not? Or
It's
does them,
it's Tuesday night at the same
Tuesday
time.
actually works, yeah. Gym's on
Should we
Wednesday,
just plan on
lacrosse,
doing?
soccer, that's all. Tuesday doesn't really have any of those. What's, James, what is do you know what the soccer and,
Yeah,
lacrosse is?
meetings tonight,
It's Tuesdays, right?
second Tuesday of the month.
okay, so let's not try and make James compete. That's a great thing we can work around. It's not saying, all right, we've got Tuesdays sound pretty good, but not the second of the month. How do you guys feel up there for Tuesday evenings in general?
Yeah, I'd like to do it later in the day, if
Later
possible.
in the day?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have soccer practices all week in the evenings.
I see Dave was nodding for a minute, and I think we've lost Veronica. Did we lose Veronica?
Yeah.
All right, we have to nominate Veronica to do all the work while she's gone. Did I see you nod for Tuesday evenings in general?
Yes, not the second Tuesday.
Not the second Tuesday. Okay, my bad, everybody. The second Tuesday is the wrong
Like
call.
Fourth Tuesday might be the best one,
Well,
right?
I will look ahead at the calendar and find a Tuesday evening that is not already being held by all the committees you represent.
Don't look at rec, we meet like Friday mornings at 8 a.m.
I know. Some of you guys are really easy. Like a lot of these committees are meet during the day or on weird times. But it seemed like Tuesday evening was it was somehow like the one nexus that you all could theoretically come together. But I will make sure it's not the second. And I'll also make sure it's not the same night the Board of Selectmen is meeting, because I know we have Veronica, who's also on the Board of, I don't know if you know this, she's on the Board of Selectmen.
Shocking.
But I also recognize there's a lot of stuff going on in town. You guys might want to be involved in the Board of Selectmen meeting. I don't want you to have to choose.
Well, Mondays, guys.
Mondays is when planning meets to
Well, it depends. It's usually, I think it's every other week.
it's every other week. So
Yeah.
we could even do Monday evenings if that's what people like. How do people feel broadly about Monday evenings?
Monday evenings.
As long as it's not a planning board meeting night. I'm
All right.
fine with Monday.
And David, how does Monday evenings generally work for you?
That's fine.
Okay, so I feel like Monday and Tuesday evenings.
Yeah, if you got thumbs up there.
All right, Monday and Tuesday evenings seem like good times. I will look ahead and see.
They'll figure it out.
Yeah, and we could say we really like Tuesdays, and then we get 6 months down the line, you all Samba classes on Tuesday nights, and we have to change it. That's totally fine. You guys are the decision makers. No one's the boss of you. You're the boss of yourselves in this. Which is great. Except for the chair, who's really in charge of it all. So watch out for her. All right, so I am just going to really quick look at a calendar and see, and just pick a date, because we should technically pick a date at this meeting.
I really like Monday better than Tuesday.
Monday better than
Just saying.
Tuesday. All right,
I do like
so
Monday better than Tuesday.
planning, let's see, we just had planning.
We just
Yes,
had
we
planning.
So that's the second and fourth planning. So not the 16th or the 30th, because those are planning, right? We gotta check that.
Well, wait, did they skip a week?
That's the other thing. Sometimes these things change.
I want to say it's the next meeting, May.
Yes, it's definitely May, because we're technically in April right now, which is a shocker to me
I
still.
know.
We do
Okay.
like- We do like the 9th.
The 9th. Let me really quick pull up my, let me see if there's anything on the town calendar for the 9th. By the way, in case you are looking for great resources, the town calendar is amazing at having everything together. So No, stop giving me all the things. Townsend, this is not technically my computer, I'm just signed into it. So it's got all of this weird stuff that it has to keep prompting me. It doesn't have, I can't use Chrome on it. It's a fun little device.
Yeah, now that it's listening to your
Come on.
conversation now, you're gonna get all sorts of cool things on there.
Yeah. We'll work on
Oh, I know.
that.
We're gonna have a lot of weird pop-ups, all of us, in the next week or so.
All right, let's look at this. So I see the planning board is meeting on the 9th next week,
So,
next month. So if that's the case, they're probably not meeting this, they're meeting, oh, because there's the 2nd is the 1st.
Mhm.
So how do people feel about the 2nd or the 16th next month? It sounds like Mondays are slightly better than Tuesdays.
yeah, either of those is good for me.
All right, I'm looking at last one. Any thoughts on the 2nd or the 16th? I hear thumbs. Veronica is wholeheartedly endorsed this message. She's left though. So
Ronnie's in.
either one works. So how about we aim for the 16th? Does that sound good, or do you think we should aim for the 2nd?
Nope, I think it's completely up to you guys. I'm not gonna dictate
All right, he's being smart.
when you guys meet. Seriously, it's hard enough to get everybody together, and I know people's busy schedule, so we're already a month off, but it's okay because we have the time and we're getting started now. So we're gonna be going through our schedule just a month behind what we planned, but it's not a problem.
My vote is for the 2nd, just because the only homework we really have to do is the survey. And if we can get that, then we're
You know
gonna be
what?
much more intense and
You're right.
heavy. So if we can get the survey out the door faster, then we can
Good
actually
point.
get into the meat of the
Good point.
project. So that's,
All right.
and that's my only reason for the
Right.
2nd.
Because summer's coming and after mid-June, people are gonna be less inclined.
All right.
So we should try to get the survey up for a good solid month, hopefully before then,
All right.
before school itself.
So I have Monday, May 2nd, and that's what our next meeting will be. And I'll put that I'll make sure that gets, if the clerk wants to note that down. It's Monday.
At 6 o'clock.
Yes, that seems like a good time for folks. Is that correct? It's entirely, you guys are the agency here, so you get to tell
Thumbs
me.
down from Colby.
Colby, what was your thumbs down? Go for it.
6 o'clock.
Oh, he doesn't like 6.
Yeah.
He's gonna partner down.
Yeah, I'm pretty busy till about 7. But I'm just one person, so.
Well, if everyone is open, how do people feel about pushing it back to 7?
I'm fine.
I'm fine with that too. I don't mind
Yeah, I
eating dinner
can
at
do
home
that.
first. And
All
stuff.
right. Does 7 work for you?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. See, everyone should speak up. You only get what you want when you speak up. Awesome. All right, next meeting.
Credit, I love
Monday, Monday, May 2nd at 7 p.m. We have our next meeting. And so I think the only other thing left is the adjournment, which our chair gets to do.
We need to make a motion. Sitting before making a motion to adjourn this
I
meeting.
make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
Ooh, geez, that's not a lot. I'm on that once. I gotta write that.
And now you gotta go around and have everybody vote. And you get the list of everybody's name.
Yeah. So whenever we have Zoom, it's generally a good idea to have a roll call vote, just because that's a good practice. So do you want to lead us through a roll call vote? And
Okay, can you read the names? Oh, Colby, how do you vote? Yes, no?
that for me? Yeah, please.
I can't read this. The name is up there.
Dave Nugent.
Dave Nugent.
Dave, how do you vote?
Dave doesn't vote because he doesn't.
oh, that's right. Dave can't vote this meeting. Well done, Dave. Well done.
I vote to adjourn.
All right.
Henry?
I vote to adjourn.
Yes.
Aye.
James Gates, yes.
Okay, I guess we adjourn.
Good job, everybody. Look at that. 7:45.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you guys
everybody.
for having me.
Yeah.